Hello and welcome to Yoga for Dad. Today's story time I wanted to focus on Creoles and give you a little history about Creoles, Creole culture, and how Creoles just came about. So starting off, French Black Creoles from Louisiana. That's specifically who I'm talking about. They popped up, this mixed race started popping up in the 18th century. They are mixed with Black slaves, European, and Native American. I'm sure that we can all use our imagination on how this mixed race kind of started popping up. And some of the slave owners decided to free their offspring. And when they did that, they created this mixed race of free colored people. And this only happened in Louisiana. These free colored, that I know of, this mixed race of free colored people. And they started their own community. They started marrying within their communities. And they started creating their own music, their own food. They started speaking their own language, French Creole. And they started getting a basis, like a strong root in Catholicism. So they have their own culture, and it began in the 18th century. And that is my culture. After World War I, some of them decided to migrate to Texas. And then after this big flood in the 1920s, some other Creoles decided to migrate to Texas. And then after World War II, some Creoles trying to escape a lot of the racial injustice and look for better jobs and better quality of life, they migrated to California, specifically Los Angeles and San Francisco. You might be thinking, like, are Creoles considered white? Are they considered Black? How do they identify? And I would say that nowadays Creoles identify as Black. However, their culture is Creole. We still have a very strong base Creole culture, which is a little bit different than Black culture. It is part of the Black culture, but a little bit different. It's like being Catholic and Christian, but not all Christians are Catholic, right? Kind of, I don't know. Anyway, so what solidified that Creoles are Black? So in this country, in 1896, under the Plessy versus Ferguson court case, it was ruled that separate but equal was constitutional. As long as Black people had the same things as white people in separate places, it was constitutional, solidifying the Jim Crow law. Mr. Plessy was Creole. So that also solidified the one drop of Black blood law or rule, that if you had one drop of Black blood, you were considered Black. So under the law, Creoles were considered Black. However, in those days, Creoles had a very strong sense of identity within their Creole culture, and they felt that they were Creole. However, under the law, they were considered Black. Now, this identity kind of changed in the 1960s when all of the racial and social justice issues were going on. A lot of the Creoles started identifying as Black. However, their Creole culture was still important to them, so they identified racially as Black, however, culturally as Creole. And I feel that most of us identify as that right now. We identify as Black racially, culturally Creole. It's a hard question. It's always been a very tough question for me. I hate when people ask me, what are you? Because when I say French Creole, they don't like that answer. They're like, what is that? And then I just say Black. But then I feel weird because obviously I'm not just Black. So, and then I have to go through this whole spiel about what I am, which is fine, but sometimes you just don't want to do that. So it's important that people know that French Creole is a thing, and we do identify as Creole. However, we do identify as Black. When I say that I'm Creole, to me, that's saying that I'm Black, because obviously I'm not just Black. And we come in all different shades, colors, shades. And I mean, even within brothers and sisters. So with that being said, I wanted to give you some background because my dad's side of the family, very fair, and but they were considered Black. They were considered Negroes. They were considered colored. My granny's birth certificate has colored on her birth certificate, and on my birth certificate, both my parents, it says Negro on under them. And although my dad could have probably passed for white or Puerto Rican or something, that was his culture. He strongly identified as Black Creole. Strongly. That was who he was. And I think that confused a lot of people. And that was one thing that made his life a little bit hard, because that's who he was. And not everyone that he was around or understood the Creole culture. Where he grew up, I think there were a lot of Creoles. But outside of that, and especially going through race revolution in the 1960s, my dad was right in the middle of that, going to college. And I think that was hard for him, because he really identified as Black. So I felt like he was always trying to prove himself, prove that he was Black. And I think that he felt like that always. But that's the tricky thing about our culture in the United States. And like, we still see this racial revolution going on all the time. So it's interesting. Race in our country is definitely dependent on laws that are passed, where you live. Wouldn't it be nice if people understood that? I think right now it's just so black and white. People want to make it black and white, and there's so many gray areas. They have music like Zydeco, food, gumbo, etouffee, and language, French Creole. Unfortunately, they don't speak, well, at least my generation does not speak French Creole. In the California Creoles don't speak it. I don't know if they still speak it in Louisiana. I hope they do. But with my grandmother's generation, my grandmother's generation, they were treated so badly in Louisiana speaking French in the Catholic schools that they all decided that they were not going to teach their children that, because they didn't want their children to go through the same kind of scrutiny. So unfortunately, prejudice and racism kind of played its role in our generation and my mother's generation learning the French Creole language. But however, we still The music is still very hoppin', and the food is very much a part of our culture. Catholicism was very much a part of my culture growing up, and very much a part of my mother's generation and her parents' generation. It's kind of interesting that all of my mom's family and everybody went to the same Catholic school. They all went to Bishop Conady, and like the guys went to Cathedral High School. So they all went to all girls and all boys high schools. And they all did, like all my uncles, all their friends, all the Creole community did. And when we grew up, at least I did, I went to Catholic elementary school, Catholic high school, and then it kind of fizzled out with my sisters and brothers. But a lot of us did. It was a very strong part of our roots. A lot of my research for this story time was provided by Tina Steptoe, and she has a book out, Houston Bound: Color and Culture in a Jim Crow City. So I read an article online from her, and it's called When Louisiana Creoles Arrived in Texas, Were They Black or White? That's it for today for our story time. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you're enjoying this journey, please subscribe, like, and share, and I will see you again.